everyone. Happy Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. You might notice something just a little bit different about our set here today. We're going fall themed because, Mike, it's that time of year. The leaves are falling, the colors are changing. It's time to get a little spooky, which is wildly appropriate for week 5, especially going into the waiver wire because things just got weird this weekend, Mike.
Yeah, it's been weird all season.
Yeah.
Pretty weird season. Every season's a little weird. This one's been pretty weird. I mean,
Rashid Rice
better than tight ends.
Right? There was an interesting conversation the other day, and it was on the FTN Fantasy Show on Sirius XM Radio. I can't remember who the hosts were at the time, who it was talking. But one of them was saying, we need to get rid of the tight end position in fantasy. Because would we put the fullback position in fantasy? We had an era where guys like Mike Allstott, they were fantasy relevant, so you drafted them as a running back. It was all inclusive. Is that something we need to do with the tight end position? I thought it was an interesting take because we're look at the landscape now. Tight end 10's like 6 points. So
any tight end you want to plug in can get you 3 points.
Yeah.
Or 15 points, it feels like. Yep. It's just
great
matchups, and they should be working it that way, and the guy gives you 2 points. Yep. And then another guy in a lousy matchup who's done nothing all season, 20 points. It's crazy.
Well, I think where I'm struggling is like we're looking at guys like Mark Andrews, who we know is a very talented receiving tight end, getting 1 target on Sunday. I mean, the guy's we're at a point where we're seeing articles that are saying, is Mark Andrews droppable? And at first I laughed at the notion, partially because the first article I read was on Sportskeeda. But then I started to really think about it. After another 1 or 2 weeks of this, is he droppable?
Which tight end are you unwilling to drop in all of fantasy football? I mean, Bowers, maybe. Everybody else has had such low games that it's I wouldn't drop Andrews because I think it's the same as anybody else out there right now. Like we were saying, it could be 3 points, 2 points, or 20 points. But yeah, I understand that. Hey, Matt Berry and Love Hate writes it up as receivers, and he'll throw tight ends mixed in there when they have good matchups. And I know he started doing that so he could stop writing about tight ends, right? Like I'm feeling like that's a good idea. That's all.
Well, yeah. And at a certain point, I think the discussion, maybe we go into next season and the discussion is, okay, if this happens again, we have another stinker season, we start rolling these tight ends to where it's a flex. You don't have to start one. They become a flex. Yeah, Mark Andrews the last 2 weeks, he went a 33% snap share and a 46% snap share, 1 target, no catches each week. So
it feels like something's wrong with him, and they're not telling us because they know he'll get coverage on the field. I don't know. That the snap share is really low for him. That's why
it is really low. Buy and sell you dropping in on YouTube here. That's our boy Sam, who is going to be on the Mailbag Show with Matt Chester and I this Friday from In Between Media. So come check out that show, 6 p.m. Eastern. He's saying he believes it was Michael Fabiano who said that about the position. He could be correct. I actually do believe that is correct. It was Michael Fabiano. It's an interesting take. I mean, it's something that as we get deeper into the season, maybe we'll start talking about a little bit more as fantasy managers, as analysts. Something needs to change maybe with the position. A position that I need to change. I wish we didn't have to start quarterbacks some days, Mike, especially this season. It's been starting 2 quarterbacks is a struggle in 2 QB and Superflex leagues right now. 3 guys, though, who are flying under the radar and are probably more than likely available in your league right now. We've got Justin Fields in Pittsburgh, Joe Flacco in Indianapolis, and Andy Dalton in Carolina. I want to start with Justin Fields first because I just read a little tidbit about him. Mike Tomlin has insinuated that we're getting into the territory of even when Russell Wilson is healthy, Justin Fields has done enough to win the job. I didn't think we'd be hearing that after week 4. They're 3-1, though. Justin Fields has looked very good. For fantasy purposes, he's been stellar. He's only 34% rostered on ESPN, Mike.
It's hard to argue with winning in real football, and he's winning. He's managing the game really well. I didn't think he got treated fairly in Chicago, by the way. I've had this conversation with a couple of Bears fans I know. I liked him for fantasy purposes in Chicago. I was wishing he did a little bit better than he did in the win column as well. But, 312 yards and a touchdown passing, 55 yards and 2 touchdowns rushing. And next up is Dallas, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, right? So,
Yeah.
and he's available almost everywhere. Like, he's very highly available. If you're looking to stream, like, say you have someone like that guy who seems like a fantasy bust this year, Patrick Mahomes, on your team, and he keeps costing you wins. I have a team where this is the case, by the way. He keeps
Same.
costing me wins.
Yes.
I am not opposed to plugging Justin Fields in next week, and that doesn't mean Patrick Mahomes isn't a great real life quarterback, by the way. What it means is, for fantasy purposes this year, he was off a little last year too. He dropped.
Yeah.
He was still a top 10 guy. He's not a top 10 guy right now. If I'm not saying drop him, but I'm saying, if you want to move away from him for a better option in your starting lineup, don't sweat it. Get the win. Get the
Yes. Don't get so ingrained in a player that you refuse to move off of them. I wrote about that in my waiver wire column today, which is live on optimusfantasy.com. You can check it out over there. But I think it's so important right now in this landscape of fantasy, what we've dealt with in the first 4 weeks of this season. Fluidity. You have to be a fluid manager. Don't get stuck on these guys. Because I'm at a point now where there are tight ends. I'm like, I'll start you over Travis Kelce every single week. Because he's just not producing.
I write a strategy article for drafting called the Adaptive Draft Strategy. I talk about this throughout the season, right, as well. Adapt or die. Those who adapt quickest to whatever the changing environment is will continue to win. Those that slide and follow after things are already dictated, you're not going to win. You're too late. I I moved towards drafting more running backs this season. It has paid off exceptionally well.
Yep.
Why? Because everybody was doing this 0 running back thing and drafting wide receivers, which meant the value was there for a different position. The same with players. Like, I really preach this stuff when the fantasy playoffs come. Don't be afraid to plug in the guy with 3 great matchups, even though he's not as big of a name as, say, Patrick Mahomes. Well, Patrick Mahomes' team is 12-2, and he's only playing half the game. You're not going to win your fantasy matchups. You need people fighting and putting up points for you. So, same thing here. Like, I actually will contemplate Justin Fields over Mahomes. I can already tell you in one league, because of freaky scoring, I'm going to play Geno Smith over Mahomes next week. I already made the switch in my lineup.
Good. Guys, I would start him over next week. Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Derek Carr, Patrick Mahomes, Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers. If Anthony Richardson plays, I'd start him over Anthony Richardson. I'd probably start him over Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. I might even start him over Josh Allen, because Allen last week, the 7.3 points, he's been so inconsistent. And I like what Fields brings to the table. Now,
the coaching for the Steelers is
so much better.
That's really what's helping Fields a lot. I mean, just excellent coaching staff.
Well, the Bears aren't known for their coaching.
No,
Mike.
The Steelers are, though. Yeah.
Yes, Jackson Smith-Njigba was throwing some shade at Shane Waldron a little bit earlier this week, which I thought was interesting. So now Joe Flacco is a guy who landed on this list. The last 2 or 3 seasons, we're not going to talk about Joe Flacco. Here we are. He's 0.2% rostered in ESPN. We don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to come back next week. Team is saying I hope not as well. Right.
But
yeah, Joe Flacco looked really good.
He threw 2 touchdowns. He had 168 yards, and Joshua Downs and Michael Pittman were viable fantasy plays. And I felt horrible. I told people to sit Pittman because Richardson was starting, and I'm like, he's been horrible with Richardson at quarterback this year. We're seeing all these old guys get dusted off and prove that they're just more accurate than the younger players and making guys relevant again who are good. Yep. We saw it with the Panthers 2 weeks ago. We just saw it this week with the Colts. I don't know who I'm starting Flacco over. His numbers weren't great, even with the 2 TDs. He was good with the Browns though last year, man. I played him a lot last year. So
I mean, with
I
the
like.
Browns, yeah, he was QB, I believe 6 in that stretch of 5 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. If he's going to start long term, I'm sorry, he was QB2 in that 5-game stretch with the Browns, almost got him to the playoffs. If he's a long-term starter, something happens with Richardson, this ends up being, it drags out 4-6 weeks, I will start plugging Joe Flacco into my lineup. I'll start plugging Michael Pittman into my lineup a little bit more. I'll start getting guys like Josh Downs in my lineup a little bit more because he's going to feed those
Like,
receivers.
free Michael Pittman, and if Flacco's starting, it's done. Like, you can play him again and feel confident that he'll produce. With Richardson,
Yeah,
I had no confidence in Pittman. Now, Alec Pierce, on the other hand, is one of those drop candidates, right? With the switch at
right.
quarterback. So
Yep. Now we got buy and sell you in here. Sam saying just for a moment, Colts receivers were worth having. It's true. There could be a few more of those moments, though. I mean, we just don't know. Now, Andy Dalton, the last guy on this list, and we just kind of referenced him dusting off the old asset, bringing him out here. I don't think we need to say a whole lot about him. 8.8% roster on ESPN. He's just a guy you should go out and get. He's going to be middle of the road fantasy relevant. 2 QB leagues.
5 touchdowns in the last 2 games. That
Yep.
we don't need to say much more than that. Over 200 yards each game as well. So he's producing.
Last time he was a full-time starter for any extended period of time, he was QB 22 in New Orleans, and that was he missed 3 games, and he was still the overall QB 22. So I think Dalton's a good guy to go out and get. You're not starting him in 1 QB leagues unless, I mean, you're really screwed and your 2 QBs were Tua and Anthony Richardson, and you just can't.
I have a couple of teams like that, so I might have to, but yeah.
Yeah, right. I do too. I'm doing what I can. Hey, I had to start Jalen Wright last night in my home league. Still lost. Raheem Mostert last minute just killed me. Speaking of running backs, Mike, let's move on to the waiver wire running backs. That's a tongue twister. For this week here, we're going to start with Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. He is currently rostered in 43.3% of leagues. Then we'll move on to Trey Sermon, who is rostered in 0.9% of leagues. Then we have got Kareem Hunt in Kansas City, 21.6%. Tank Bigsby, who is rostered in 6.4% of leagues. And Justice Hill, who is rostered in 9.8% of leagues. Rico Dowdle, he's been real up and down this season.
He's leading in the snap shares though for the Cowboys for the season. He looks like he's starting to take the job completely over. I mean, people expected that. I'm not a huge Rico Dowdle guy, but if you're hurting at running back, I think the guy who's taking over the position on his team is probably good.
Yeah, I mean, he's north of 4 yards per carry the last 3 weeks. You like to see that. Dallas needs to run the ball more. It's become very apparent. Teams are starting to really latch on to CD and making it harder. They're having to do trickier stuff. So if they can get Dowdle going, I think it's good for the team and good for your fantasy teams because we're all hurting everywhere. Trey Sermon, now this is a name I really wasn't expecting to see here. He's over in Indianapolis, but I don't hate it, especially if we're going to see more Flacco.
Well, Jonathan Taylor has a high ankle sprain, so that pushes Trey Sermon up towards the top. Taylor's probably going to miss time. I know there's nothing official there yet, but high ankle sprain. If he doesn't miss time, I'd be surprised.
Yep.
Sermon's been very usable when playing as a starting running back, and as you just said with Flacco, I kind of like that. Like I think he'll very playable.
Yeah, Steichen, for what it's worth, is saying they're not placing him on IR. So, I mean, if he does miss time, it'll be a week or two. But there's an opportunity for Sermon to maybe earn some more work down the line. He's not a bad grab. Kareem Hunt, I think we are going to see take some steps forward, hopefully activated from the practice squad. Carson Steele's just not that good.
Kareem Hunt had 45% of the running back snaps to lead the Chiefs this week.
That's right.
Right? 69 yards on 15 carries, 2 receptions for 16 yards. I think they were trying to get him back into playing shape. Remember, the guy literally came off the couch.
Yep.
He knows the offense. Steele, I mean, I hope you didn't waste a lot of fab money on him. I wasn't super high people on adding him or Pirine. By the way, when it came up, I would have preferred Pirine. He had a touchdown this week. Steele's he wasn't drafted. I know they love him there, but they love him as like a backup fullback type of guy, not as their starting running back.
Yeah, I was never. We talked about that multiple times on this show. Yeah, and with Hunt, I think it's just a matter of time before we're talking about him sneaking into maybe having some RB1 games. He, like you said, he knows this offense. Just getting him into shape. Now, Tank Bigsby broke my heart by actually playing well. So I really think he's going to. I really thought he was going to take a bigger chunk of this offense early on, and he did. Week 1, we saw the even split, but 2 carries against Buffalo in week 3 for 9 yards. It's not exactly exciting. 7 carries for 90 last week, though. That's something.
He had a 48-yard run. He looked really good. He looked sharp on his other plays, too. They keep, since they drafted him, they've been talking about working him into this running back rotation more and more, and they haven't done it yet. If he keeps producing, they're going to do that. He's not very highly rostered either. His snap count's still like a third of the running back snaps, but Travis Etienne doesn't look good. He didn't look good this week.
Does he look hurt to you?
I don't know. I'm used to thinking he's a stud, and this season, I don't know what's wrong. I mean, I often wonder if somebody's dinged up in some way when they're not playing well like this, because he doesn't. And if you watch any of the game, I mean, he doesn't look that great on the field.
No, he was RB3 last year, so we know he's good. I have a feeling he's dinged up. And if that's the case, I mean, 7 carries for 90 yards. Obviously, that's an efficiency we're not going to see every week from Bigsby. No. But to your point, they wanted to get him worked in last season. It didn't seem to click, as we've talked about before. But now they are working him in. I mean, those 12 carries in week 1 were pretty exciting for those of us who are like, yeah, finally, we're going to see some Bigsby. With as poorly as he's played in the matchups coming up, Indianapolis, Chicago, New England, these are teams that are going to have to run the ball. Get Bigsby in there. And I think he's a great ad. And the best part about him, I don't think you're going to have to fight people in your league to get him on your team.
No. He's very low rostered. I mean, what is it? It's 6.4%, right?
Yep.
Same with the next guy we have here to talk about, too. He's low rostered as well.
Yeah, Justice Hill. Somebody we've brought up a few times on this show, but then he just had 2 weeks where he just didn't do much. It seemed like, okay, maybe not. This past week, though, in spite of being behind Derrick Henry's 199 yards, massive week, 21.6 points in my home league, PPR, 6 catches, 78 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty good.
Targets, too.
Led the team in targets. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are getting 1 apiece, of course. And they beat Buffalo in pretty convincing fashion. Here's my concern. Does Justice Hill go back to irrelevant for another week or 2 before we see him pop again? Or are you feeling more confident that maybe this becomes a regular thing because it's worked so well this week?
I look at him as if you're needy. Give him an ad because he's low rostered, and you can use him as a bye week fill-in because the bye weeks are starting up. And if he starts producing regularly, you have him. If he doesn't, you just cut him through another waiver process. But they ran all over the Bills. I mean, I thought the Bills were the best team in the league going into that game, and my mind changed quickly during that game. I was like, wow. I never thought the Ravens were bad, even after the first win. But man, they just ran all over them.
Buffalo's going to have to figure that out.
Well, this is the path to victory for the Ravens. They can do this to anyone, anytime they want.
Yeah.
So, I expect to see some more of this. Whether we will or not, I don't know. But I expect.
We think we know so many things, Mike. I want to get into the chat here. We've got a few questions here. First one coming from Jason Quinn. Jason, thank you for tuning in, man. He wants to know what to do with Zamir White. 17 touches, I think, with no real production. Hold or drop White for Chase Brown, Kareem Hunt, Roshan Johnson, or Justice Hill. So I'm going to immediately be done with Zamir White.
Kareem Hunt would be the first one for me, and then Chase Brown out of that list.
Yeah. Chase Brown's going to start taking a lot of work out of that offense. He has looked phenomenal. And Zach Taylor has acknowledged as much. He looks like he's coming out of a cannon when he has the ball. Yeah.
And that offense is going to continue to get better, by the way, as well as the season's going now, because everybody's healthy finally.
Yeah. The problem with Roschon is I think he's touchdown dependent. And they'll come, but this isn't Jamal Williams.
It's a three-headed monster in that backfield, and we don't know what they're going to do. I mean, DeAndre Swift was brilliant this week.
Can he do that
3 weeks of being miserable, right? So it's no,
and he'll probably go back to being miserable. To be honest,
I think so.
Yeah, well, T Money over there on YouTube popping in here. 10-man PPR. He's got Burrow, Jacobs, Connor, CD, Chase, Kincaid, DK Metcalf, JMO, Ford, Chase Brown, Josh Downs, Dontavian Wicks, Worthy, Brooks on IR. Got offered DJ Moore for Worthy. Am I pulling that? I wouldn't now. Not with Rice out.
Not with Rice out.
Yeah.
They're going to have to gadget up Worthy, I think, in some ways as they move forward. We got to see a glimpse of that week 1, right? But their wide receiver core isn't very good. So Andy Reid's going to get creative. Similar to how we talked about Neighbors being used by Dable with the Giants. You're going to see some creativity come into play here.
Yeah. Let's move on to wide receivers while it's on our brain here. Guys that we are targeting this week on the waiver wire, folks. Dontavian Wicks, Josh Downs, Trey Tucker, Xavier Legette, and Wan'Dale Robinson. The first one I want to ask you about, Xavier Legette. I'm excited about this.
Oh my God, so happy about it. I did not see that coming.
No, me either. At least not this season. I figured it was we're a year or two out from seeing Legette really do anything in Carolina.
10 targets. If he gets 10 targets every week, and to be fair, he wasn't going to get that with the other quarterback, right? And get the production.
No way.
If he did, they wouldn't be near him, right? He'd have like 3 catches. So, 6 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And he's very low rostership. 25%, not he's a little more than I thought he would be. Yeah, I like him a lot. I like that situation right now too with Andy Dalton. I
love it with Andy Dalton. Legette didn't get enough love going into the draft because he was from a small school. Well, kind of South Carolina. But he only played 1 season really. Slew of injuries, personal stuff, family stuff kept him off the field. But his senior season, he was really, really good. Showed up at the Senior Bowl, impressed the hell out of a ton of people, including coaches and scouts. I thought he did enough to move himself into the 2nd or 3rd round. He didn't, went a little bit later than that. But man, this is a great opportunity. And I think with Andy Dalton, we could see 10 targets a game.
Well, they need somebody other than Deontay. And if it's him, I mean, that's great, right?
Yeah.
And Chuba Hubbard, right? You get your 3 skill position players going there, and they'll all be viable.
What about Jonathan Brooks though? A lot of talk about, hey, he's going to be coming off IR soon. Hey, what are we going to do? I don't think they're going to use
Chubb's already on the path to coming back prior to Jonathan Brooks, so I'm riding the Chuba train until it ends, right?
Yep,
and I think he's earned with Andy Dalton as quarterback. I think he's earned playing time, at least a split backfield. Once Brooks is back, how long before he's fully up to speed? I know it's easier for a running back, but we're weeks away from that.
My gut tells me we're not going to see any meaningful work from Brooks this year. From a fantasy perspective, they're going to ease him into it.
Yeah, I'm like at the soonest, we're weeks and weeks away. And not 2 weeks, like 4-5 weeks away. And, for some people, their fantasy season will be just about over by then.
Right.
As other people are trying to head to a championship, right?
I have a few leagues where, I'm done. Jamie Prague in the chat wants to know real quick here, would you sell Reed for Higgins in a 2025 first? Top 6 pick. I already accepted the offer, so I guess it doesn't matter what we say. I like that first. It's a top 6 pick.
Well, in Dynasty, everybody wants to get as many firsts as they can. I really like Reed, though, so I don't know if the first is going to be better than Reed. I don't know.
That's a fair point too. Yeah. All right, Trey Tucker. We talked about him last week. Then Devontae Adams got hurt. And now Devontae Adams apparently has come down with the case of I don't want to play in Las Vegas-itis, it sounds like a little. I think we're going to see a lot more Trey Tucker. And Jacoby Myers, of course, as well.
Trey Tucker has not played less than 60% of the snaps in any game this season, even with Devontae Adams starting, which was why I was on him last week.
Yeah.
He's getting the target volume, 9 targets week 3, 6 targets week 4, and he ran in a touchdown this week, right, for a 3-yard touchdown. So they're getting creative and using him as well. He's not going away.
No.
He's just not going away. I tried to be not so happy and victory lapping that he produced yet again after when I was saying to add Trey Tucker. People are like, What
What?
are you smoking crack? No, I wasn't smoking crack. Better to get in early than get in late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could have made a case last week against Carolina, 9 targets, the touchdown, the receiving touchdown, 22 points, that, that's Carolina. Carolina's defense is trash. But then he does it against Cleveland. 5 catches, he gets the rushing touchdown, 41 receiving yards. I think Trey Tucker is probably a staple in this offense. This is a Raiders team
anywhere.
that I think they can make the playoffs.
Well,
which is
see
delusional.
about that. But
it's delusional.
But he's going to continue to see 80-something% of the snaps now.
Yeah.
And that offense is more about the pass than the run. I mean, I'm sorry, Zamir White fans, but
it is.
He's not it. So
he never was.
No,
it's all right. Wan'Dale Robinson. This is one where just a name we're not hearing a lot of people talk about. I'm looking at his stat line this season: 12 targets, 4 targets week 2, 8 targets, 14 targets against Dallas. Turn that into 11 catches. He's got a touchdown this season. He's wide receiver 22 in PPR.
So Neighbors had 1 more target than he had in week 4 on Thursday night. Wan'Dale still had 34.5% target share. Right? So the whole passing tree is Neighbors and Wan'Dale. And Robinson's getting all these little short passes in the slot, and he's getting tackled almost immediately most of the time, right? That's why we had 11 receptions for 83 yards. But the volume's going to be there. The target share volume's going to be there. If you're playing PPR, he's a great addition. Yeah. I mean, the guy's going to get you over 10 points just on receptions almost weekly. Great addition. I'm surprised people aren't talking more about him. Was it Thursday night? Is that the reason why? Like, they already forgot?
I think it's the Giants. I think people are scared of the Giants, which I do understand. However, this team doesn't really have much. I mean, Devin Singletary is not an elite level running back.
Even bad teams create fantasy producers, right? So it's...
Yes. They're going to throw the ball. They have to throw it to somebody. They can't throw it to Malik Neighbors every time. They've got to mix it up a little bit. Is obviously, I mean, they're telling us exactly who it is. It's Wan'Dale Robinson.
Those guys had 70% of the targets combined. 70% in the last game. Yeah. They're literally, the passing tree has 2 branches. Pick one. And if you're not going to get Neighbors, he's on the roster. So getting Wan'Dale 100%. Is a great addition.
Yep. Now, we already talked a little bit about Josh Downs. I'm just going to throw this out there, Mike. This is if Flacco is the starter moving forward for however many weeks he starts. I think we're more interested in Josh Downs.
Everybody's talking about Josh Downs all over X right now, and Reddit, by the way, and how he should be your number 1 ad at wide receiver. He is not my number 1 ad at wide receiver. It's either Wan'Dale or Dontavian Wicks. And I understand why you'd be afraid of Wicks, all right? But I know Downs has been back 2 weeks. I know he tied for the lead in targets both weeks. The first week, he was not usable with Richardson as the quarterback. The second week, the only reason why he produced is because Flacco was the quarterback. All we've seen from Richardson this season is how inaccurate he is. And unless he's practically doing handoffs to his slot receiver, I don't want it. I just don't want it. Michael Pittman was not usable up until this week, and he's a really good wide receiver. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
out. I'm out unless I know Flacco's playing quarterback. I'm not wasting a lot of fab on that with the thought that Richardson comes back.
Yeah. I want to shout out a comment in the chat here. We've got Jeremy saying, glad to hear Reddit included. We do a last minute start sit AMA every Sunday on Reddit, our fantasy football subreddit. Mike, you joined me this past week. It was wild. Almost 1,000 questions in about an hour and 45 minutes.
I'll admit, I wasn't the biggest Reddit user ever. I probably have like 2 followers. I hardly ever go there. But I've started going there more because of the start sit questions. And yeah, it's, the notifications popping up. It's letting me know what's going on.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal community. So go check out that subreddit, guys. Now, Dontavian Wicks, brought up his name. He's one of your favorite guys on the wire this week. 13 targets last week. Jordan Love is back and playing well. Christian Watson is hurt, which is going to open up some space. Yeah, he's going to IR. Dontavian Wicks had 2 touchdowns last week. It doesn't seem like this was a flash in the pan either.
13 targets. And that's why, and you could say that could be who they were playing against. But without Christian Watson there, that's going to open it up for Dubs, Wicks, Reed, and Jordan Love back. I love everything about the offense yet again. By the way, he was one of the quarterbacks I drafted heavily and it's been hurting me to play some other guys. But it super happy to see this guy back. Man, I think we all underestimated him going into last season, Jordan Love. Yeah, I like Wicks a lot. I'm for me, as I said, it's either Wandale or him, depending on the league rules I'm in, for who I want to add on the waiver wire.
Yeah, again,
I already have Trey Tucker, so
I have a ton of Trey Tucker. Thanks to you, Mike. All right, I want to grab the chat here real quick. We've got a couple of questions. Nino Pena dropping in here asking, should he be dropping Juwan Jennings? I mean, I kind of think so.
When people went crazy, we talked about it a little bit last week. When Kittle and Debo come back, there's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense. So Juwan Jennings is a really good talent, but so are all those other guys. And Purdy spreads the ball around really well. He's not going to funnel passes to one guy. If you want to drop Juwan with them healthy, yeah, go ahead. I hope you didn't waste a lot of fab trying to get him for 1 week. And I thought he could produce again this week until everybody came back. And then I was like, forget it. There's just too many mouths to feed.
We got a ton of questions on Reddit about that, actually, specifically. And I think we are both kind of a united front on that, where with Kittle and Debo and Ayuk all there, his value is so capped at that point. He's not going to have 10 targets. Zachary Chirinkin chiming in here, Mike. Got a trade question. This is a PPR league. Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet for Zay Flowers, J.K. Dobbins, and Rico Dowdle. What are your thoughts?
So whenever I see trades where it's like a 2 for 3 or whatever, I always know I want the side with the 2. So like out of all of this, I want Walker. That's the guy I want. So therefore I want the Walker side. Zay Flowers, great talent, victim of a quarterback that spreads the ball around exceptionally well in an offense where that's their plan. So you're never going to see him consistently get you 15 to 20 points. I'm sorry, you're not. Dobbins, he's been a little up and down. It was expected, though. He was coming back. And Rico, I mean, I know we just talked about adding him, but he's not there yet. Where Walker's a beast, and Charbs, if Walker's out, is a beast right there as well, right?
Right.
Like, so, I mean, unless you need this to start a team, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, there's no way. I want Walker and Charbonnet. Zay Flowers is capped too. Patrick wants to know, Mike, struggling with this bye week. PPR, which 2 would you start here? He's got Javonte, Irving, Dowdle, Chase, and Dowdle and Chase Brown. If not Javonte, can I drop him for Wandale? So first of all, I'm going to say yes. Drop Javonte for Wandale.
I think you can too.
Yeah, I think that's very safe. The 2 I would start here, I'm going to say Bucky Irving and Chase Brown.
I agree. That's where I was gonna go as well. I like Chase Brown, especially if you're doing bye week fill-ins. I think he's gonna be viable. And Bucky, um, he's had some tough matchups right now, but that's gonna ease up for like
Yeah.
5 or 6 weeks. And when that happens, you're gonna see him pop probably. I mean, you might see White pop a little bit too with the Buccaneers once the matchups lighten up for them. Uh, People don't like to pay attention to that as much as they should, but it means a lot for these guys.
It
The
does.
coaches know when you can run on someone and they run on them. It's what
Yeah.
they do.
It's what they're paid for, right?
Yes.
They got to know this stuff. All right, guys, we're going to move on to some basic, let's call it what it is. These are streaming tight ends this week. Yeah. We've got Tucker Kraft over there in Green Bay. He is 4.7% rostered on ESPN. Cade Otton in Tampa Bay, 6.2% rostered. And then Taysom Hill in New Orleans, 27.2% rostered. Mike, let's start with the ugly one, Taysom Hill, because it's ugly only because he just keeps freaking scoring.
I like him more than anybody else because his low games are everybody else's low games are just as low, and his high games are super high. Now, with that said, he got hurt. He is the goal line back for this team, though. They talked about it in the offseason. I knew this was coming. This is what it was going to be like if he was healthy. Kamara kind of struggles in that role, and they want to save him from catching a vicious beating at the goal line. And Taysom Hill has taken a vicious beating at the goal line. So I like him. If he's playing, he's a viable play. You know, if you want to say he's not a tight end, who cares? I don't care. Give me the fantasy points, and he can play that position. And I know people want to talk about his down weeks. Who's better right now with their down weeks? You want the one target to Mark Andrews? Come on, it's whatever. It's just as good, and the ceiling's very high.
Oh, his ceiling every week is tight end 1.
Yes.
He's currently, we have got Taysom Hill as a tight end 20 in PPR.
Yeah, he's played 2 games.
But next week he could be tight end 2.
I don't even know if he finished either game, by the way.
I don't know that he did.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Cade Otton, because this was a weird one where I kind of stumbled upon him writing my waiver column. I always have liked Cade Otton.
He was a viable play the end of last season with Baker as the quarterback for weeks, like 5 or 6 weeks.
Yes.
He was a really good play.
Yes.
Then he kind of disappeared the beginning of this season, and I don't know why nobody drafted him, but nobody drafted him.
No.
The 9 targets, I mean, will we see more of this is the question? I don't know, maybe. Did he just get White's targets in this game? Because White was getting targeted a lot out of the backfield. That could be the possibility here. But again, if you're gonna take a shot at adding a tight end who produce, which is a lot of people have been chasing points this week at tight end. You know, you grabbed Hunter Henry, you plugged him in, it didn't work. You grabbed Isaiah Likely, you plugged him in, it didn't work. That's what we could be looking back with both of these other guys here, by the way. So I don't know, but Cade Otton has proven to be viable in the past and been the bottom end of the top 10, but a top 10 tight end producer for weeks on end. So I think, again, I'll take a shot in the dark with him and not worry about it playing tight end roulette and play him.
Yeah. I mean, he's got 15 catches, 13 catches, 17 targets over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm saying he had 8 targets against Denver, 9 targets against Philly last week, middling in the 50 yards, but he gets a touchdown. All of a sudden, he's a tight end 2 for the week. But I think that I feel like his sliding scale right now is somewhere between tight end 12 and possibly being tight end 1 because the position's batshit crazy. Another guy who could be tight end 1 every single week is Tucker Kraft. I mean, we're talking about how exciting this Green Bay offense has been. Kraft, I think, is as viable as anybody, especially with Watson out.
Well, with Watson out, that helps. With Musgrave active, it's not as good. I mean, Luke was technically the starter last season, but when Musgrave didn't play, Tucker Kraft was really good last year too. But when Musgrave played, Tucker Kraft wasn't. They both played this week. Tucker Kraft had a great week. Again, with Jordan Love in the lineup, I like whoever's getting the minutes at tight end for for Green Bay because Jordan Love just high volume passing attack, spreads the ball around. I mean, when you're throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game and 3 guys get 10 targets or 9 targets or something, it's nice. For fantasy, it's nice.
Get a part of it, right? You just want to be involved in that offense somehow. Kraft, probably not going to break the bank on the waiver wire either. So I think he's a pretty easily attainable. People are just shying away from touching tight ends at this point. Get the cheapest guy
you gotta
possible.
have one,
Yeah, you got to have one. Though some weeks you could argue that maybe not starting one would be more beneficial.
Well, I'll bring to the league. I'm a commissioner and a vote for this. If we just make it just another flex spot. So yeah, and Tucker Kraft. I mean, he's 4.7% rostered in ESPN. Kate Otten 6.2. So they're available if you're looking to continue to play tight end roulette. Do it. Go ahead. I might wait till after waivers process and add one of those guys myself if I was going to do it. The one I would put in the process though was Taysom Hill, just because his ceiling's so obnoxiously high, right? Like that
weird hybrid player who's listed as a tight end is probably the way to go out of these 3. Now, where are you going to make room for all of these players that we're telling you to roster? We've got some suggestions of players to drop. Let's start with Alec Pierce. I think this one is going to be pretty obvious after previous conversation, unless, he's the Anthony Richardson guy.
He is, and a lot of people don't like it, but for me, it's I used to watch my son play football with his friends in the backyard sometimes, and my son would play quarterback, and one kid that was the best wide receiver, he'd just tell him, just throw it up there, I'll go get it. And he'd look back and look in the air and he'd run under wherever the ball was. And that's what Alec Pierce is doing with Richardson. Richardson just throws, shoots that ball out of a cannon with his arm, and Alec Pierce goes and gets under it and gets it, which means that Alec Pierce is probably a better deep ball threat than most of us thought he was, because he can do that. But if Flacco's the quarterback, don't worry about it. That's not happening. It's going to be back to short yardage passes to Pittman and Downs, which is, in all honesty, better for the Colts.
Much better for the Colts. Now, Aaron Rodgers is on your list as droppable. I agree.
He has 2 scores over 10 points. I mean, he hasn't broken 20 points, fantasy points yet this year.
Nope.
Drop him.
He got closest against New England.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I think Father Time's caught up with Aaron Rodgers. Now, Justin Herbert, not as old, but he's in an offense that hates his skill set. At least for fantasy purposes.
Averaging like 11 fantasy points a game. Yeah, not usable.
Nope, not usable. Easily dinged up too.
That was my knock on when people were pushing hard for Quentin Johnson the past couple of weeks, right? As an ad, I'm like, but there's only like 3 targets. 80% target share. There's only 3 targets.
He's got a 66% target share. There were only 3 targets. He got 2 of them, I guess. Now, Rashad White's the next one here. I could not agree more. Putrid 2.8 yards per carry. And that's really only bumped up because he had 4.9 yards per carry last week against Philly. Bucky Irving's the guy who's going to end up getting the majority of the work. We've even seen them shy away from giving him receiving work. So that's a problem.
Let him go.
Yeah, because I'm really sorry. I thought he was going to be a borderline RB1, RB2 this season.
If there's someone bringing you pain in your life, just let them go.
Just let them go. It's so easy. It's so easy.
Just let them go.
Just let them go. Off into the wind. Now, not off into the wind here are our defenses, because in a lot of leagues, you don't have a choice. You might not love it. Too freaking bad. These are the defenses, though, Mike, that I think we both love. Seattle and New England were highlighted in my column this week. But Denver has emerged as one of those defenses you might actually want to hold on to for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, Vance Joseph sucked as a head coach here, but I'll be damned if his defenses aren't really, really good.
Well, they've actually played very well. The matchup is right this week too. By the way, they're playing the Raiders, right?
Yep. Yeah,
And the Raiders give
Vegas.
up the fifth most fantasy points to opposing teams' tight ends. So, and you're talking about a team that has had 10 fantasy points, 6 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points, and 11 fantasy points. And they've played offenses that don't give up a lot of fantasy points during that time. So they average 10 fantasy points a week. And now they're playing the Raiders, who give up a ton of fantasy points
Tons.
to
Yeah.
defenses. So I like the Broncos a lot because of that.
Yeah, no, I love the Broncos defense. I love Seattle's defense too, but I want to get to this question here real quick, Mike. Jason Quinn over there on X dropping in. Guys, if you're watching us on X, please drop those questions in. We can actually see them now. It's glorious. He wants to know if we would drop the Steelers defense for Denver or for Seattle.
This week, yeah, I think I might. He plays in a league with not a lot of teams, so he can go get him back if he wants, more than likely.
Then if you can do that, then yeah. I'm for it. Great matchup. Now, New England's defense, Mike, you are over there in New England. They've been a little bit better than Bill. Now, not the 13 points they pulled off in week 1. They've been pretty good, and they get Miami this week. I think that's the key here. This is very matchup, but Miami's offense can't do anything.
So they've played against teams that don't give up a lot of fantasy points to defenses so far in all 4 games this season. I mean, San Francisco, the Jets, believe it or not, the Jets don't cough the ball up much at all, right?
Yeah.
Now they're playing Miami, who gives up the 3rd most fantasy points opposing teams' defenses, and that's because Tua's out. So we went from making fun of the Titans to we can make fun of the Dolphins now as the team. I mean, they're actually Tua's been out. They've given up the most fantasy points to opposing teams' defenses. Oh, man, you have Tyreek Hill yelling at people on the sidelines. Devin Akan just looks almost not playable with what they're doing. They need to right that ship. They're not scoring points and they're coughing the ball up. I'll take the Patriots defense there.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Now, Green Bay, they've got the Rams in LA this week. Still a really good matchup. Matthew Stafford looks washed. I think the guy's done.
The Packers D is actually super good too. They're the second best fantasy defense out there right now. So, you have no wide receivers of note. The whole offense is going through poor Kyron Williams.
Yep.
Blake Corum with that massive snap count of 0. So, we're really looking at, I think, Green Bay teeing up another double-digit fantasy point day for this defense, right? It's just, and the Rams are giving them up. So you're going to see it.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. Guys, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. That was the end of our defense and special teams. We've gone through drops. We do have a couple more questions here I want to get to, Mike. Quincy Davis dropping in the chat here. It says, start 2. I have Fields, Lamar, Herbert, and Mahomes. Do I start Fields at home Sunday night or Lamar versus Burrow away game and Monday night Mahomes at home? I'm starting
Fields and Lamar.
That's exactly it. I'm starting Fields and Lamar.
Yeah.
He also wants to know, Mike, would you drop Kyle Pitts for Hunter Henry or keep Kyle Pitts?
I'll probably keep Pitts.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm definitely keeping Kyle Pitts.
If you want me to say, I love Pitts, I didn't say that. But
no.
I'm certainly not in love with Hunter Henry either, right? So it's
Austin Hooper got the touchdown.
So disappointing.
I know. But this is football, right? It's kind of like that movie, This is 40, but this is fantasy football.
This is fantasy.
It gets ugly. Now, guys, if you are watching this video, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for riding another Tuesday out with Mike and I here on the Optimus Fantasy Football Waiver Wire Show. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We have tomorrow night the Nate and Herms Show at 11 p.m. Eastern, and then we have the Nate and Casey Show, the Optimus Podcast, on Thursday. Mike and I will be back on Friday for DFS Live, and then we have the Mailbag Show at 6 p.m. Eastern on Friday as well. You can catch us on Reddit on Sundays. Mike, it's been a blast. let's get out of here. Have a great week, guys. Make sure you get out there, get these players on waivers, and win those leagues.
Thanks, everyone.